Oh yo, hope you did something fun today. How's the new look? I hope it's better. Something like this is what I had wanted from my very first video. Sure, it took me a long time to get around to making that happen. I'm still a little torn over the art on the walls though. I think it's kind of cute and a cool idea. It's nice to show off my favorite arts and could be fun to change up what pieces are displayed in the future. For example, having the pieces themed after the video, so Riptober videos could have only Riptober arts hung up, but I'm not sure if it doesn't make the background look too busy and kind of messy. Let me know what you think down below. Do I keep the art pieces or take them down? Perhaps still do them just less? Now, onto the fun part, the arts I have to share with you. If you saw the thumbnail, then you know that I decided to go with pixel art as my first video with the new assets. It's a form of art I have a lot of love for and dabble into once every few years. It's been long overdue to revisit the medium. I've actually decided I want to draw some pixel art way back in February, I think? And then went, oh, this would be such a cool thing to do with a voiceover. So I marked it down as my second voiceover video after the Meet the Artist one. However, I did not keep to these plans as I wasn't able to give the channel a visual uplift with that anniversary video. And thus my following ones were about that. And now that it's done, I can do the pixel art one. My volunteers for it are the Jetta, Y, and Sindri. Since all of them have fan art piling up on Toy House, so I need to throw in my own art to break it up. Plus all three of them don't have a pixel art from me yet, so they were as good as any victims for today. Had wanted to do genre too, but wasn't sure if I'd have the time, and gosh, good thing I didn't, cause these three already went way overboard on time, and thus why this video is a little late. Again. Yay. One of these days I'll figure out this whole time management thing, but it ain't today. Okay, I think I kept you all here long enough, so let's jump into the arts. I think I'll start by going over my personal history with pixel art and then explain how I currently draw. Sounds good? Then strap in! It took me a while to realize pixel art was a thing. I found out about digital as soon as I got access to the internet, and while at the same time I did run into Pokemon game sprites, I didn't really connect them to pixel art, and to be honest, to this day, sprites and art kinda are separate categories in my head. They have a lot of overlap, and I couldn't tell you exactly when something stops being one thing and becomes another, but in my head, they are two ends of a spectrum, and I guess that spectrum has a lot to do with their size. I'm not sure exactly when I learned it's a thing, though I do know what person made me adore it and want to try my hands at it, and that's Discasum. His art is phenomenal. I adored it since the first piece I saw, and I still do to this day. He's crazy good. I think back then, early 2016, his art tablet broke, and thus he was drawing with a mouse and ended up into pixel arts, and they were so gorgeous. I was in love. I think we did an art trade where he drew me Besh, and my gosh, I adore that art so much. Was my profile icon for such a long time. And that made me want to try my hands at pixel art too, and I made two pieces. One little chibi of my friend's Pokasona Ginjika, and two dragon arts. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I did look at other people's art and tutorials and tried to figure something out. I did try to keep my line art 1 pixel wide, though it had plenty of L-shaped edges and some doubling up lines. I did do gradients too, which can be kind of controversial. Some people say it no longer counts if you use gradients and airbrushes and such. I say who cares, draw however you like and whatever is the most fun for you. And I said the same thing back then too. Though I did some lining over top the gradient to kinda mimic a color shift, sort of how I do my shading nowadays. It looks messy, it's like a really lazy form of dithering, I guess. But I'm lazy and I think it looks funky and fun and no one can stop me. That messiness lives on to this day, though I did try proper dithering for that chibi I mentioned. I tried to make it according to all the pixel art police rules, though I recall really not liking how it looked. I was not ready to accept the hard edges and the lack of blending. To this day, I struggle to accept hard edges in my normal illustrations, but I certainly have come around to them in pixel art. And here's where the trend started me on not touching the pixel art form for a few years, then doing a few pieces back to back and not touching it again. 2 years later, during Artful, I was stuck on my laptop and had no access to my desk for a bit, so drawing with my tablet was a pain since it's so big. I think that motivated me to do some pixel art again because you can get away with a mouse. So I did 2 little arts, and I was still very clearly trying to mimic normal digital illustrations, but without using actual gradients. I made a lot of stripes of color, slowly transitioning from one color to the other. And don't get me wrong, that looks really cool. There's people who can make amazing and very realistic looking pixel arts doing that. But to me, that's not the essence of the art form. It feels kind of like mimicry, and because of that, it's really hard to make it look good. That said, I do think my attempts look kinda nice. I still like the art. 3 years later in 21, I met the other person who's a big pixel art inspiration to me to this day, Honey Charme. Ran into his art on Flight Rising, and boy howdy he draws so pretty! To this day, whenever I draw pixel art, I have him and his art on my mind, and secretly hope that he'll see it and like it. He's like my pixel art idol. I hope to win the approval of, even though I really don't have to since he has already given me plenty. He was really nice. We did an art trade and I got a little headshot commission from him too. And he was even nice enough to write up a Google Doc of pixel art tips for me since I expressed my great interest in learning the medium. And it was by putting those tips into practice, plus their encouragement of there being no right way to do pixel art, and being a bit more mindful about how I draw, that I started doing pixel art how I do it now. During that year's art fight, I made it a goal to draw 5 pixel illustrations, and I did do that, and honestly, I think they turned out quite good. I tried things in them. I think one of them has airbrushed blushes. The one I did of Boom, Moogie, and Tyrion became my blueprint on how I do full bodies. I enjoyed the messiness of my earlier attempts, so I brought it back into the shading, where I blocked out the shadows in one multiply layer in one color, locked that layer, made a gradient going to a darker color, then drew with that darker color some messy transitions, and in the skin blushing, by putting down a blob of color and then circling around it to sort of make a transition, though for small areas I did dithering, which is spacing pixels in a pattern. There's loads of patterns out there to achieve different effects. The main one is having a row of pixels, then a row of every other pixel and going onwards like that till there's none, thus creating a gradient. I think that looks very fun. I was also unusually good and actually kept on drawing a little. I did 3 more pieces after Art Fight ended that year, 2 full bodies for other peeps, and a Tyrion headshot for myself, which I'm still very happy with, and I think that's still the cutest Litten I've ever drawn. I also did a full body rough sketch for Aren, and then abandoned it till 2022 April, so just sat there for almost half a year. Then I lined and flattened the majority of the art, leaving the hardest parts like feet and hands and a good little boy zigzagging to draw later, and abandoned it again till February of 2023 when I finally finished it. During that first abandonment period, I did draw a full body pixel gift for a friend, but besides that I haven't done pixel art again till this week in 2024 May. It's been a while, huh? Over a year since I finished an art. Over 2 since I sketched one. How shameful. I keep saying I'll do this more often, and yet, at least my last attempt was kind of decent in that regard, even when I still fell off. Time will tell if I'll ever start doing this regularly. Gonna keep trying, and we're starting this attempt with a bang since I did a whole 3 drawings for this video. So guess now it's time that I talk about how I made these and approach pixel art in general. So for this, canvas size is pretty important. I tend to not go for more than 400 pixels at the longest edge of the canvas. In the past I had gone over that limit for those art fight headshots, but never for full body arts. That's always been 400 pixels max, unless there's multiple characters, and even then the shortest edge limit is still 400. I'm kinda torn if I wanna try doing something smaller or bigger, and unlike with digital art, you have to commit to the size from the get-go, cause while you can extend your canvas as needed, you can't resize pixel art, it becomes a mess. And I found those 400 pretty comfy, so it's scared to make it different. I sketched the art with a normal brush, but on the right size tiny canvas, slightly zoomed in so I can't see the canvas edges. I actually do the same thing for my regular illustrations too. I don't like knowing where the edge is. I find it harder to fit everything, so instead I sketch zoomed in, and once I have the pose and composition figured out, I resize the sketch to fit the canvas and crop it if my sketch ended up not meeting my prior dimension expectations. Then I draw in the refined details, unless I got carried away and forgot to do the resizing before drawing them. That kinda has happened a lot recently. However, that wasn't an issue with these, since I did no refining on them. Don't see much of a point since they're so tiny, and you kind of have to think slightly differently when drawing pixel art. It's hard to explain, but details don't translate the same way. So refining feels like a waste of time. I just linered them in, tweaking the liner till it looks good. From the linered phase onwards, I keep another window open on the side that shows the art I'm working on at 100% scale to keep an eye on how the final looks and how the pixels I'm putting down are reading at the size everyone will look at it. I find that's especially helpful for line art, and that's definitely the part I spend the most time on, unlike with my usual illustrations, where coloring tends to take up the biggest chunk of my time. To be fair, my pixel art coloring is rather messy and quick, while line art needs a lot of cleaning up and consideration. Though I would say the same about my illustrations, and I do wonder if that difference is just down to lack of practice, that if I spent more time doing pixel art, the lining would go by faster than the coloring. Who knows? It's probably some combination of those factors or something. So when I line, as you saw, I don't go placing individual pixels, I make long lines like I do with digital art, and they often come out, well, they look kind of hairy to me. That zigzaggy line that comes out for some reason looks like a hairy normal line when zoomed out. And there's people who do pixel art with thicker lines like that, and it looks super cool. But personally, I prefer the 1 pixel width lines, so I go through the line and trim it down. Only exception are fluffy things like here, where I want that sharp edge look, so I allow those L-shaped corners to stay there. I'm not too strict with it though. You can definitely find line art in these where it's kind of a blob of pixels, because I color my line art, and thus I feel like I can't get away with that, just like I do with my converging lines in my normal art. Call it cheating if you want. Though keeping the line art separated into many different layers for easier coloring is a pain, so I feel like what work I shave off not trying to make all the line art connections perfect. I pay with layer management and coloring. As I said, my coloring is a pretty simple affair. For some reason, I still separate out my flats into different layers, even though they all could totally stay in one since I shade with multiply layers over the whole thing anyway. But oh well, I have a paint bucket dedicated just for pixel flats that has the hard edges and references the line art folder, so I don't need to make any selections and there's no bleed through. It's quite handy. I do my flats. Then if there's any patterns, I'll draw them on layers slipped to the layer that holds the flat or whatever object has the pattern. Though with the Jedi I couldn't be asked and did this as the last step of coloring. Once that's done, I give the skin a blush, though I forgot to do that for D till I was working on the patterns too. And I never remembered for the other two, my poor boys. It's alright though, the final versions of the arts that are posted on my socials do have the blushes. I did draw them in afterwards, don't worry. After that, I block in the background. Don't know why, but for pixel arts, I love leaving negative transparent space in the composition. I block in a square for where the background will be, but the character and some foreground and middle ground elements will stick out of it. I really like how that looks, and it's fun to play around with when composing the shot. So far, I've only done very simple stuff, and that's true for these as well. Nothing detailed, but enough to sort of give a sense of place. I suppose Sindri's looks more detailed because of the water, but that's just lots of blobs. For shading, I wanted all of these to be quite moody, with a source of rim light and all those dramatics. So D got sunset with a lantern hanging out of frame, Burb got nighttime with a full moon, and Y got edgy. The burnt tree stumps were supposed to imply a fire, but the reds I used aren't warm enough to be from an actual fire, cause I didn't want the overlap with these pieces. So he has battlefield fantasy shenanigan lightnings, I guess. Who cares, that's why, he does whatever he wants. To achieve these end goals, I started with a multiply layer over the whole thing, then another multiply layer under it for the shadows, blocked those out, locked the layer, and picked a slightly darker color and deepened the shadows during that messy, scratchy transition. Though I did away with the gradient here. Sure, it helps the shadow transition, but dunno. I kind of want to be in a place where I can make these without having to rely on any tools outside of the pixel pens. I say that while I used an airbrush for the Smoke and Wise art. And I do want to experiment more with dithering too, and leaving the gradients behind is likely to motivate me to do it in more places than just patterns. After that, I made a layer in between the two multiply layers with the add blending mode and do the highlights, same principle as with shading. Block out the main lights, then pick a brighter color to highlight the brightest bits in those highlights. On a layer above all the other layers, also set to add, I do the rim light, do the same steps for the background, and that's shading done. For the final touches, I go color the line art, and sometimes I'll make another add layer above the line art for the eye highlights if the shading ain't enough for my taste. Then slap my signature on there and tada! A pixel art is complete, or in this case 3. I'm quite pleased with how these turned out, especially Y. He really showed up for this one. They were all supposed to be quite simple, just hanging around poses, yet his turned out somehow more interesting. I think the Jettas is the weakest one. The most just standing there, but oh well, they can't all be winners. And she does have plenty of just being there arts that somehow turned out super good, so can't complain. With that done, let's head out to the showcase, shall we? This one's going to be interesting since pixel art does not like being zoomed in on. It's quite shy. Well, that was a doozy. I should really rethink doing multiple arts for a video. It's so much work, and this one was already so much work with needing to set everything up anew. And yet I still have a lot to do, it never ends. Like, I'm looking at this right now and deciding I don't like all the grays. I need more saturation in here, more color. So expect some tweaks next time. Subscribe if you wanna see how well I keep up with making pixel art. I'm thinking of making some pixel attacks in this year's art fight, so might dedicate a whole video to those. Oh, and let me know if you've ever tried making pixel art. It's honestly so much fun. I definitely recommend giving it a go. And the cool thing about it is that you definitely don't need any fancy tools for it. A mouse works just fine, and all programs I've ever tried had the tools for it, including good old Microsoft Paint. It's a very charming medium. If you need more inspo, I'll link the two guys I mentioned in the description. Check out their stuff, it's gorgeous. Anyhow, thanks for watching. Do dumb be fun. Bye bye.